generation will remember. He became a pop star. You could just sense he was trouble. He was a good-looking lad, a good singer, but academia was not for him. And he got into all sorts of shenanigans. And I was actually just a witness to a form of primitive baptism in the toilets, where a rather cocky, arrogant young boy had his head put down the toilet and flushed. I was there, I witnessed it, I didn't do anything about it, so Percy took me in and rendered the cane to my buttocks. I took 3, dropped my kecks when I got home, had a look at the 3 bars forming across my buttocks, which are red going to black. Nobody had telephones in those days. Mick Bowen hadn't got it. I actually came into town, knocked on his door and said, "Mick, you're going to get it tomorrow." He didn't feel a thing. He arrived with 5 pairs of underpants and his rugby shorts on. Nothing felt whatsoever. The other rather strange character which I remember was actually the head boy when I was in year 1. K. Harvey Proctor. In a later life, did become the Conservative MP for both Basildon and Billericay. He was slightly to the right of Attila the Hun, I think, in his politics. Member of the Monday Club and possibly an appointment in Thatcher's mid-80s government. Until the 13th of June 1986, when the People ran the headline, "Tory MP in Rent Boy Spanking Scandal." Apparently Harvey had hired a couple of young lads. He was dressed in Percy Gardner's academic gown, and he administered corporal punishment to these lads in their shorts for imagined offences such as truancy and fighting in class. And he was fined £1,450 and then became a shirt seller in Brighton, where I believe still in that industry today. Whilst among members of the Tory government, I became a teacher in a later life, and obviously at the moment there's a lot of controversy over Michael Gove. He's a bit of a hate figure in the teaching scenario, but there was one answer to a question in the House of Commons. I actually warmed to him quite nicely. He was asked about the importance of European folk dancing in schools. And his response was, well, I'm going to quote Oscar Wilde on this. He said, "There are 2 things in life that one shouldn't try. One is folk dancing, the other is incest." I think he was 50% correct. Now, besides the rather eccentric teachers we came across, there were lads from the far reaches of the North York Moors, village lads, farming lads who by some miracle had passed the 11 plus and arrived, definitely in Southcott's gear, at the boys' high school. There was one lad who turned out to be a fantastic rugby player. He was called John Mennell. And unfortunately, and he was very much of his time, he caught rheumatic fever because he used to sleep in the haystack outside. And that's how he caught it. But he recovered, and he became an excellent rugby player. But he was a little bit slow in his ways, hence the nickname Dobbin. He was Dobbin Mennell. And he didn't get on with Chaz Rice, and this incident was hushed up later. Chaz actually made a mistake, which I learned from. As a teacher, you don't call the kids by the nicknames that the other kids call them. He actually called him Dobbin. And John Mennell, who was a big lad, actually walked out, picked Chaz up with one arm, pinned him to the blackboard and said, "You ever say that again," put him down, and that was it. We never heard another thing about it. And the other one was a boy called John Dunleavy, who I think might have been from Cloughton. And he looked like a male version of Keogh Kate, if you remember the comic character. He had spectacles, and he was definitely not athletic. We had Mr. Oxley for gymnastics in the first year, and we did something that wouldn't happen now, rope climbing. All remember that? When you got halfway up, somehow became slightly erotic, didn't it? When you got a bit of excitement in your nether regions. Well, for Dunleavy, it became slightly more of a problem. He was dressed in the familiar white shorts with the red piping. You remember those flimsy things? You looked up to see knackers and everything. Dunleavy was in distress. John Oxley was talking to I think he was probably talking to John Dickinson about the pole vault in the corner or something. But Dunleavy had an accent. He actually shat the rope. A stool of suede brown shite slithered out of his shorts, down the rope. And people noticed this and say, "My God, Dunleavy shat himself." Upon which John Oxley raced over and said, trying to hold himself, "Dunleavy, you filthy bastard." Took the rope down and it was taken away and never seen again. I think it was burnt round the back of the gym by Roy James and John, so it was never seen again. And I'm going to come to my conclusion by thinking about the treats we used to have in the gym. If you'd worked hard in your white shorts with red piping, you were awarded a game of pirates, or, can you remember this, before health and safety took over, British Bulldogs. And I was sort of fantasising this week, thinking about PE curricula in various areas of the country. Imagine if you were a PE teacher in Boston, and you wanted to give the kids a treat. So, Monday it would be Polish Bulldogs, Tuesday Lithuanian Bulldogs, and of course next year we'd have special sessions of Bulgarian and Romanian Bulldogs. Now, I've been on a table tonight, and this isn't vindictive because he came first twice and myself second, but somewhere in my bag I have a school report. I don't know why I've got this, but it is the school report from the sixth form of P.J. Pearson. And it's got a forward by W. Redman and a concluding paragraph by Percy Gardner. And it doesn't make great reading, but it is succinct. It goes something like, you all remember that format? Final position in class, 23 out of 23. If he succeeds, it will be through native ability. He does not appear to have backed anything up with hard work, W. Redman. P.A. Gardner. He seems to have failed to seize the opportunities which the extra year gave him. If he also fails to achieve the needed qualifications, he can squarely blame himself. Percy's writing is going a little bit off the map here. I'll just put my spectacles on for the concluding sentence. This is going to be worthwhile. So I'll go back to that. If he also fails to acquire needed qualifications, he can squarely blame himself. If he succeeds, he should not deceive himself. Thank you very much for listening to me.